May 24, 1941. Denmark Strait. 552 MN. HMS Hood, pride of the Royal Navy, engaged the German battleship Bismarck at a range of 30 miles. Within 6 minutes, Hood was gone. Of 1,480 men aboard, 3 survived. The largest warship in the British fleet had been destroyed by the vessel it was sent to sink. What followed was the largest naval manhunt in history. Over 100 British warships, covering 2 million square miles of Atlantic Ocean, searching for a single German battleship that had vanished into the fog. The sinking of HMS Hood transformed a routine patrol operation into a matter of national survival. Prime Minister Winston Churchill issued a 3-word directive to the Admiralty: sink the Bismarck. This order, documented in Admiralty records at the National Archives in Kew, redirected every available naval asset in the Atlantic. The Bismarck was not simply another warship. Commissioned in August 1940, she displaced 50,300 tons fully loaded and carried 8 15-inch guns. German naval records confirm she was designed specifically to disrupt the Allied convoy routes between North America and Britain. Britain imported 2/3 of its food supply by sea. If the Bismarck reached the open Atlantic and linked with supply ships positioned there, she could operate for months, potentially severing Britain's lifeline. This is the documented account of Operation Rheinübung, the Bismarck's only combat mission, and the 6-day hunt that followed the destruction of HMS Hood. The disaster in Denmark Strait was not unpredictable. British naval intelligence knew the Bismarck had left port. On May 18, 1941, the Swedish cruiser Gotland spotted the Bismarck and heavy cruiser Prince Eugene in the Kattegat Strait between Denmark and Sweden. Swedish naval logs, now held in the Swedish military archives, confirmed this sighting was reported within hours. British reconnaissance aircraft photographed both German ships in Grimstadfjord, Norway, on May 21. Photo reconnaissance reports from the Royal Air Force, archived at the Imperial War Museum, show clear identification of both vessels. Admiral Sir John Tovey, Commander-in-Chief of the British Home Fleet, ordered HMS Hood and the newly commissioned battleship HMS Prince of Wales to intercept. Both ships departed Scapa Flow on May 22. Ship movement logs from the National Archives confirmed their departure times and assigned patrol sectors. Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland commanded the interception force. His tactical plan, preserved in Admiralty documents, called for closing range quickly to negate the German ship's superior fire control systems. At 5:52 a.m. on May 24, visual contact was established at 26,000 yards. Holland ordered his ships to close the range at full speed. At 5:54 a.m., both sides opened fire. The engagement lasted 5 minutes and 53 seconds. At 6 a.m., a salvo from Bismarck struck Hood's aft magazine. The resulting explosion, witnessed by survivors aboard HMS Prince of Wales, broke Hood in half. The bow section remained afloat for 20 seconds before sinking vertically. Official Board of Inquiry reports, completed in June 1941, determined that a shell penetrated Hood's thinly armored deck and detonated in the aft magazine containing 4-inch ammunition. 3 survivors were recovered by HMS Electra, Ordinary Signalman Ted Briggs, Able Seaman Bob Tilburn, and Midshipman William Dundas. Their testimony, recorded by the Admiralty, remains the only eyewitness account from Hood. The destruction of Hood created immediate strategic consequences. HMS Prince of Wales, damaged by 7 German shells, broke off engagement at 6:13 a.m. War diary entries from Prince of Wales, archived at the National Archives, document her withdrawal to shadow the German ships from maximum range. Admiral Tovey received notification of Hood's loss at 7:30 a.m. aboard his flagship, HMS King George V, positioned 300 miles southeast. Admiralty signal logs confirm his immediate response. Redirect all available home fleet units toward the last known position of Bismarck. At 8 a.m. on May 24th, the following British ships were converging on the Denmark Strait: battleship King George V, battleship Rodney, aircraft carrier Victorious, 3 cruisers, and 11 destroyers. Additional forces from Gibraltar, including battlecruiser Renown and aircraft carrier Ark Royal, received orders to steam north. But the Bismarck had been damaged. During the engagement with Hood, 2 shells from Prince of Wales struck Bismarck. One penetrated the forward hull below the waterline. German damage control reports, captured after the war and now held in the Bundesarchiv Militararchiv, document a fuel leak from ruptured tanks. This leak left a visible oil slick on the ocean surface. Admiral Gunther Lütjens, commanding Operation Rheinübung, faced a tactical decision. Radio intercepts decoded by British intelligence at Bletchley Park, now available through declassified ultrafiles, show Lütjens reported his fuel situation to German Naval High Command at 9 a.m. He decided to proceed to Saint-Nazaire, France, for repairs rather than return to Norway. This decision, documented in intercepted German communications, committed Bismarck to a 1,700-mile journey through waters increasingly saturated with British warships. Throughout May 24th, British cruisers maintained radar contact with Bismarck. HMS Suffolk and HMS Norfolk, equipped with Type 284 radar, tracked the German ship from ranges of 12 to 15 miles. Radar contact logs from both vessels confirm continuous tracking until 3:06 am on May 25th. At that time, Bismarck executed a series of rapid course changes and disappeared from British radar screens. The loss of contact created panic within the Admiralty. Without radar tracking, the Bismarck could alter course in any direction across 2 million square miles of Atlantic Ocean. Admiral Tovey ordered a search pattern based on the assumption that Bismarck was heading for France. This assumption, recorded in his operational log, was correct, but for 31 hours, no British ship or aircraft could locate the German battleship. During this period, Bismarck maintained radio silence. German naval protocols, documented in captured operational manuals, required strict communication discipline when being pursued. But on May 25th at 9 a.m., Admiral Lütjens transmitted a lengthy radio message to German Naval High Command. The transmission, lasting 30 minutes, provided a detailed tactical report and requested air cover when approaching the French coast. British direction-finding stations across Scotland and England detected this transmission. Bearings from multiple stations, preserved in Admiralty records, triangulated Bismarck's position to within 100 square miles. However, initial plotting errors by Admiralty staff placed Bismarck 200 miles north of her actual position. This mistake, documented in post-action reports by Admiral Tovey, sent British ships steaming in the wrong direction for 7 hours. At 10:30 a.m. on May 25th, an RAF Coastal Command Catalina flying boat spotted Bismarck 690 miles west of Brest. The aircraft, piloted by Flying Officer Dennis Briggs, transmitted the sighting immediately. Aircraft log entries, held at the RAF Museum, confirm coordinates and visual identification. But Bismarck was now only 130 miles from effective German air cover and 700 miles from Saint-Nazaire. Most British ships were too far away to intercept. Admiral Tovey calculated that King George V, steaming at maximum speed, would run critically low on fuel before catching Bismarck. His operational log entries show he considered breaking off the pursuit to ensure his flagship could return to port. Only one British force was positioned to intercept, Force H from Gibraltar, commanded by Vice Admiral Sir James Somerville. This force included the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal and battlecruiser HMS Renown. At 2:50 p.m. on May 26th, Ark Royal launched 14 Swordfish torpedo bombers. The Swordfish, a biplane with a maximum speed of 138 miles per hour, was obsolete by 1941 standards. Fleet Air Arm operational records describe it as vulnerable to modern anti-aircraft fire. The first strike mistakenly attacked HMS Sheffield, a British cruiser shadowing Bismarck. The magnetic detonators on the torpedoes malfunctioned, and all 11 torpedoes either exploded prematurely or missed. Sheffield reported no damage. This incident, documented in Ark Royal's action report, forced an immediate return and rearmament with contact detonator torpedoes. At 7:10 p.m., Ark Royal launched a second strike. 15 Swordfish armed with torpedoes fitted with contact detonators. Flying through deteriorating weather, the Swordfish located Bismarck at 8:47 p.m. German anti-aircraft fire, recorded in testimony from surviving Bismarck crew members, was intense but largely ineffective against the slow-moving biplanes. 2 torpedoes struck Bismarck. 1 hit amidships with negligible effect. The second torpedo struck the stern. The stern hit jammed Bismarck's rudders 15 degrees to port. German damage control teams, working in the flooded steering compartments, attempted to free the rudders. Post-war testimony from survivors, collected by British naval intelligence and archived at the National Archives, confirms these efforts continued throughout the night of May 26th. Chief Engineer Walter Lemon organized multiple attempts to regain steering control. According to survivor accounts compiled in the book Battleship Bismarck, a survivor's story by Baron Burkhard von Moenheim-Reckberg, the ship's 4th gunnery officer, teams tried manual operation of the rudders, attempted to blast them free with explosives, and even considered cutting them away entirely. All attempts failed. Without steerable rudders, Bismarck could only sail in a slow circle. Admiral Lutyens transmitted a final message to German Naval High Command at 9:40 p.m. Ship unmaneuverable. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer. This message, intercepted and decoded by Bletchley Park, is preserved in ultra-decrypt files. Throughout the night, British destroyers from the 4th Destroyer Flotilla conducted torpedo attacks. HMS Cossack, Maori, Zulu, Sikh, and the Polish destroyer Pirun closed to within 4,000 yards, launching torpedoes and engaging with gunfire. Destroyer action reports, compiled by Captain Philip Vian and held at the National Archives, document these attacks as harassment operations designed to prevent German repair efforts and exhaust Bismarck's crew. No torpedo hits were confirmed during these attacks. At dawn on May 27th, Admiral Tovey's main force arrived. Comes King George V and HMS Rodney closed to engage. The battleship HMS Rodney, armed with 9 16-inch guns, was the most powerful ship present. At 8:47 a.m., Rodney opened fire from 24,000 yards. King George V commenced firing 1 minute later. Bismarck returned fire at 8:50 a.m. The engagement that followed was not a battle. It was an execution. Bismarck, unable to maneuver and sailing slowly in circles, could not effectively aim her main batteries. Rodney's 3rd salvo, fired at 8:54 a.m., struck Bismarck's forward turrets. Gunnery logs from HMS Rodney, preserved at the National Archives, document this hit disabled both forward turrets. By 9:02 a.m., after 15 minutes of sustained fire, Bismarck's main armament was silenced. All 4 main turrets were destroyed or inoperable. But Bismarck remained afloat. British battleships closed the range to 3,000 yards and continued firing. Between 8:47 a.m. and 10:15 a.m., King George V fired 339 rounds of 14-inch shells. Rodney fired 380 rounds of 16-inch shells and multiple salvos of smaller caliber guns. The heavy cruiser HMS Dorsetshire fired 254 rounds of 8-inch shells. Ammunition expenditure records from all three ships, documented in post-action reports, confirm these totals. Bismarck's superstructure was demolished. Fires burned throughout the ship. According to survivor testimony compiled by British naval intelligence, hundreds of crew members were killed by shell impacts, fires, or flying debris. At 10 a.m., Admiral Tovey ordered his battleships to cease fire and withdraw. King George V was critically low on fuel. Remaining longer risked leaving Tovey's flagship stranded in the Atlantic. Tovey ordered HMS Dorsetshire to finish Bismarck with torpedoes. At 10:20 a.m., Dorsetshire fired 3 torpedoes. 2 struck Bismarck on the starboard side. 1 struck the port side. Dorsetshire's action report, archived at the National Archives, documents all 3 hits. At 10:36 a.m., Bismarck capsized to port and sank. Her battle ensign was still flying. German survivors, swimming in the oil-covered water, were pulled aboard British ships. HMS Dorsetshire and HMS Maury rescued 110 men before a reported U-boat contact forced them to withdraw. The German weather ship Sachsenwald and the U-boat U-74 rescued 5 additional survivors. Of Bismarck's crew of 2,221 men, 115 survived. Among the survivors was Baron Burkhard von Mollenheim-Reckberg, who published his account in 1980 after decades of research using both German and British sources. His book remains one of the primary verified sources for events aboard Bismarck. British post-battle damage assessment, conducted using survivor testimony and photographic analysis of wreckage, concluded that Bismarck's armor had largely held against shell impacts. Most shells destroyed superstructure and internal systems, but did not penetrate the main armor belt or cause catastrophic flooding. The ship's sinking was attributed either to torpedo damage from Dorsetshire or to scuttling charges detonated by German crew members. Survivor testimony differs on this point. British records credit torpedoes. German survivors insist scuttling charges were set. In 1989, oceanographer Robert Ballard located Bismarck's wreck 15,700 feet below the surface, 400 miles west of Brest. Subsequent expeditions documented extensive damage to the hull but could not definitively determine whether torpedoes or scuttling caused final sinking. What remains undisputed is the operational outcome. Bismarck completed her first and only combat mission. She sank HMS Hood, and within 74 hours, the Royal Navy destroyed her. The loss of Bismarck fundamentally altered German naval strategy. Adolf Hitler, according to records from German Naval High Command conferences preserved in the Bundesarchiv, became convinced that surface raiders could not operate successfully against British naval superiority. On May 28, 1941, one day after Bismarck's sinking, he ordered the suspension of all Atlantic surface operations. Germany's remaining capital ships, Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau, were redirected to Norwegian waters, where they served primarily as deterrent forces against potential Allied landings. Their operational capabilities were constrained by Hitler's personal reluctance to risk their loss. Grand Admiral Erich Rieder, commander of the German Navy, documented his frustration with these restrictions in his post-war memoir, My Life, published in 1957. German capital ships, he wrote, became imprisoned fleet, unable to influence the Battle of the Atlantic. The strategic initiative in the Atlantic passed to U-boats. German submarine production, according to naval construction records, increased dramatically in late 1941 and 1942. The focus shifted from surface engagement to submarine warfare against merchant convoys. For the Royal Navy, the Bismarck operation demonstrated both capability and vulnerability. The loss of HMS Hood exposed design flaws in World War I-era capital ships. The Board of Inquiry report, completed in June 1941, identified insufficient deck armor as the critical weakness. This finding influenced the design of future British battleships and prompted modifications to existing ships. The successful coordination of multiple naval forces across vast distances validated Admiral Tovey's command structure. Post-action analysis by the Admiralty, preserved in operational records, emphasized the importance of radar-equipped cruisers for tracking, aircraft carriers for attack, and battleships for final engagement. This combined arms approach became doctrine for subsequent Royal Navy operations. The political impact was immediate. The sinking of Hood had created public panic in Britain. Newspaper archives from May 1941 document widespread fear that German surface raiders would devastate Atlantic convoys. Bismarck's destruction reversed this perception. Winston Churchill addressed the House of Commons on May 27, stating, "The Bismarck has been sunk. The menace which these warships constituted to our food supplies and our communications with the United States has been decisively diminished." This speech, recorded in Hansard parliamentary records, was broadcast nationally. For Germany, the loss represented more than one ship. Bismarck embodied the prestige of the rebuilt German Navy. Her destruction after such brief operational service damaged morale within the Kriegsmarine and undermined confidence in surface warfare doctrine. Admiral Lutyens went down with his ship. His body was never recovered. German naval records show he was posthumously promoted and received state honors, but his tactical decisions during Operation Rheinübung were criticized by surviving officers. Specifically, his decision to proceed to France rather than return to Norway after sustaining damage, and his lengthy radio transmission on May 25th that allowed British forces to locate him, were identified as critical errors in German post-action analysis. The three survivors from HMS Hood carried psychological scars. Ted Briggs, the youngest survivor at 18, spent decades advocating for recognition of Hood's crew. In 2001, he published his memoir, Flagship Hood, The Fate of Britain's Mightiest Warship. He died in 2008, aged 85, the last living survivor. In 2001, a Royal Navy expedition to Hood's wreck confirmed the ship rests upside down in 9,300 feet of water. The expedition, led by David Mearns and documented in his book Hood and Bismarck, located the stern section 1,500 feet from the main hull, confirming the magazine explosion theory. The final accounting: in 6 days, the Royal Navy committed 2 battleships, 2 battlecruisers, 2 aircraft carriers, 11 cruisers, and 21 destroyers to hunting 1 German battleship. Over 150 sorties were flown by reconnaissance and strike aircraft. This massive operational commitment demonstrated how seriously Britain viewed the threat. The Atlantic convoy system, carrying food, fuel, and war materials from North America, was Britain's lifeline. Any threat to it demanded absolute priority. Bismarck sank 1,418 British sailors when she destroyed Hood. 74 hours later, 2,106 German sailors died when Bismarck sank. No German surface ship attempted another Atlantic raid. The hunt for the Bismarck demonstrated the transformation of naval warfare. Traditional battleship engagements, decided by armor and main batteries, remained relevant. The final destruction of Bismarck on May 27th was accomplished by gun-armed capital ships at close range. But the critical turning point came from obsolete biplanes carrying a single torpedo. The Swordfish strike from Ark Royal, flying in deteriorating weather conditions, achieved what battleships and cruisers could not. It crippled Bismarck's mobility. This pattern repeated throughout World War II. Aircraft carriers, not battleships, determined naval supremacy. The lessons from Bismarck reinforced what Pearl Harbor would confirm 7 months later. The age of the battleship was ending. For Britain, the operation validated integrated naval doctrine. Radar for detection, aircraft for attack, and battleships for finishing action. This combination, refined and expanded, defined Allied naval strategy through 1945. The personal costs remained stark. Over 3,500 sailors died in 6 days of operations. HMS Hood's crew has no marked graves. Their names are recorded on the Portsmouth Naval Memorial, commemorating Royal Navy personnel lost at sea. The memorial, maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, lists 1,415 names from Hood, alongside thousands of others from the Battle of the Atlantic. Bismarck's wreck, photographed extensively by multiple expeditions, shows remarkably intact hull structure despite catastrophic upper damage. The main armor belt remains largely continuous. The turrets, blown from their mountings, rest near the hull. These physical remnants confirm survivor testimony and British damage reports. Bismarck was pounded into uselessness, but her structural integrity held until the end. The debate over scuttling versus torpedo sinking continues among naval historians. German survivors maintain scuttling charges were set. British records credit torpedoes from Dorsetshire. Wreck analysis proves inconclusive. What matters strategically is this. On May 27, 1941, the Royal Navy committed overwhelming force to ensure Bismarck never reached port. Whether she was sunk by torpedoes or scuttled by her crew, the outcome was determined by British naval superiority and operational coordination. Operation Rheinübung failed. Germany's surface fleet never again challenged British control of the Atlantic shipping lanes. The U-boat threat intensified, but capital ships remained confined to defensive positions. Churchill's three-word order, "Sink the Bismarck," was executed. The cost was HMS Hood and 1,418 men. The strategic gain was confirmation that Britain's navy, despite losses, maintained dominance over German surface forces. In a war where maritime supply lines determined survival, that confirmation was essential. The hunt for Bismarck was over.